What would you do if the ashes of your ancestors whispered your name and asked you to finish what they started? In a forgotten town, buried under soot and silence, a young woman returns to the place her mother warned her never to go. But beneath the cinders lies something ancient, alive, watching, waiting. As the fire spreads, so do the secrets, and one truth burns brighter than all. Some bloodlines are cursed not by fate, but by design. This is the Ember House, and once you enter, you never truly leave. The dog was already dead when I found it, curled beneath the porch swing with its eyes wide open, as if still staring at something I could not see. That was the first real sign something was wrong. I had arrived in Marrow Creek late in the afternoon, my rental car kicking up dust as it crawled down the gravel road leading to the farmhouse. The kind of road that makes you turn the radio down without thinking, like the silence around you suddenly deserves more attention than music ever could. I hadn't been back here in nearly 20 years, not since my uncle disappeared without a trace, and yet, every damn thing looked exactly the same. The splintered white fence, the sagging barn roof, the weather vane that hadn't spun in decades. Only difference now was that it all felt like a photograph, left out in the sun too long. Faded, brittle, off somehow. The house didn't welcome me. It never had. Still, I killed the engine and stepped out, breathing in the strange stillness of the air. No wind, no birds. Just that sickly sweet scent of something rotting nearby, thick and unmistakable. The porch creaked under my weight as I approached, my boots pressing into the warped planks with a reluctant groan. That's when I saw the dog. It wasn't mine. I didn't even know anyone in town still owned pets, but the poor thing lay there stiff as stone, jaw half open, tongue dry and blackened. Its body hadn't decomposed yet, but there was something about its posture. Something wrong. Almost like it had chosen that spot to die, like it had known. And its eyes, they were wide open, fixed directly on the front door. I felt a shiver trace my spine. Inside, the air was colder than it had any right to be in late August. Dust coated every surface, thick like snowdrifts. Cobwebs hung from the rafters like drapes, moving gently even without breeze. The house smelled like mildew, old wood, and something else, something metallic, like rusted iron or dried blood. I dropped my bag by the stairwell and started opening windows, trying to let in some air. The floorboards groaned under every step. They remembered me. It wasn't nostalgia that brought me back to this place. It was obligation. My mother's voice on the phone weeks ago had sounded strange, tight, restrained. She told me someone from the county records office had reached out, said the property couldn't stay vacant anymore without a living relative claiming responsibility. The town wanted to tear it down, but before they did, she said, someone had to go see what was left, and apparently I was someone. I explored the first floor in silence. The old rocking chair was still in the corner of the living room, facing the fireplace. The TV set was cracked, as if someone had punched the screen from the inside. In the kitchen, a row of mason jars lined the shelf above the sink, cloudy and sealed tight, the way my uncle used to keep them. Most were filled with pickled things, onions, beets, carrots, but two of them held something else, something I didn't recognize. One looked like teeth. I didn't linger. The cellar door was bolted shut. Had always been. My uncle claimed he stored hunting gear down there. As a kid, I thought he just didn't want me falling down the steps. Now, I wasn't so sure. As dusk fell, the shadows in the house lengthened and grew teeth. I heard things. Not voices exactly. More like movements in places no one should be. A rustle upstairs. The sharp snap of a floorboard, then silence. I told myself it was the house settling, but my gut said otherwise. That night, I tried to sleep in the guest bedroom, the only one that didn't reek of mold or something worse. I lay on the old mattress, listening to the windless silence outside. Even the crickets were gone, and then I heard it. A slow, scraping noise coming from under the bed. I froze. At first, I thought it was a mouse, maybe a raccoon. But the sound wasn't frantic or random. It was rhythmic, like fingernails being dragged in short, deliberate strokes across wood. I held my breath and leaned over the edge, heart pounding. There was nothing there, just empty floorboards and dust. But when I sat back up, something cold brushed my ankle. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I drove into town, hoping to clear my head. Morrow Creek was smaller than I remembered. One gas station, one diner, one church, and a handful of buildings that looked half alive. The locals stared when I walked by, the way people do when they recognize a face they thought they'd buried. No one smiled. At the diner, I sat at the counter and ordered coffee. The waitress, older, graying, eyes like dull marbles, poured without a word. I tried to make conversation, asking if she remembered my uncle, James Rourke. Her hand paused mid-pour. "You shouldn't be out there," she said, voice low. "Place doesn't like strangers, especially not family." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She leaned in close, breath warm and sour. "They say the Rurik stirred up things that don't forget. That house was supposed to be burned, but no one had the nerve. Now it's just waiting." Waiting for what? She just stared at me, then walked away without answering. Back at the house, I found something new. The dead dog was gone. Not a trace of blood or struggle. No tracks. Just a faint mark in the dust, as if something heavy had been dragged toward the tree line beyond the field. I followed it briefly, but the trail vanished after a few feet. And that's when I saw the figure. Standing at the edge of the cornfield. It was too far to make out details, but it was tall, unmoving, and I could feel it watching me. I blinked. It was gone. That night, I went through my uncle's old belongings, searching for anything that might explain what the hell was going on. In the attic, under a tarp, I found a box labeled Merrow Records, 19131949. Inside were faded photographs, handwritten maps, and a brittle leather-bound journal. The last entry was dated June 3rd, 1942. "The whispers are louder. The rites must be kept. We are the last tether, and soon that too will fray. God forgive what we buried beneath the well." I didn't sleep that night either, but this time I dreamed. Of hollow-eyed things beneath the floor, of the wind whispering names I'd never told anyone, of a woman in white, digging through the walls with bare hands, crying. When I woke up, the journal was open beside me. To a page I hadn't read yet, one word was scrawled across it in red ink. I didn't remember falling asleep. But when I opened my eyes again, the sky outside had turned the color of old bruises, purple, gray, with streaks of deep orange clawing across the horizon. The air in the room had gone colder, denser, like breathing through wet cotton, and that word, written, still sat bold and red on the open journal beside me. I ran my fingers over the page. The ink wasn't dry. It hadn't been there before. A sound rose from downstairs. Not a bang, not a creak. It was a hum. Low, continuous, almost human. I grabbed the flashlight and crept down the attic steps, boots silent on the worn board. The house below was dark, too dark, considering the fading light outside. The hum grew louder with every step, and I realized it was coming from the living room. More specifically, from the fireplace. At first I thought I was imagining things, but when I got close I saw the faint glow, dull red, like embers. But there had been no fire in that hearth in decades. And the humming. It wasn't one voice, it was many. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding, and peered into the fireplace. Behind the soot and crumbling brick, where the flue should have been sealed shut, a faint tunnel curved upward, lined not with metal or stone, but something that looked organic, like ribs. The voices stopped the moment I leaned in, and something somewhere breathed. I stumbled back so hard I knocked over the old rocking chair. It hit the floor with a crack, and in the sudden silence that followed, I heard it again. Thump. From the cellar door. Thump. Deliberate. Heavy. Like fists hitting wood in slow rhythm. I turned toward it. The lock was gone. The bolt, rusted shut for decades, lay on the floor, twisted and blackened like it had been melted off. I stared at the doorknob. It didn't move, but the air around it seemed to breathe, contracting with each thump, as if the house itself had lungs now. I didn't open it. I'm not that brave. Instead, I did what cowards do. I locked myself in the upstairs bedroom and waited for morning. At sunrise, I made a decision. I needed answers. The journal had mentioned a well. I remembered it vaguely from childhood, out past the cornfield just beyond the line where the trees started to thicken into woods. My uncle had always told me never to go near it. Said it was filled in. Said there were snakes. I believed him then. But now? I followed the path behind the barn, past the rusting plow and the old scarecrow whose face had faded to a blank canvas of burlap and rot. The field beyond was overgrown, the corn dead and brittle, though no one had planted here in years. Every stalk leaned inward, forming a crooked ring that seemed to encircle something. And there it was, the well, covered in a rotting wooden lid, partially caved in. Vines curled around its base like veins. I stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into the soft, damp soil. The air smelled wrong, sweet, but spoiled, like meat left too long in the sun. I pried the lid back. A wave of cold hit me, unnatural and immediate. The shaft below was deeper than I expected, deeper than it should have been. I dropped a rock in, no sound, no echo, just endless dark. But as I turned to leave, I noticed the carvings, symbols etched into the stone surrounding the well. Some looked like eyes, others like teeth, and one I recognized from the journal, the mark that had been drawn next to the word tether. I snapped a photo and backed away. Back at the house, I started digging into the maps in the attic box. One of them, dated 1931, showed the property not just as farmland, but as part of a larger boundary labeled Hollow Parish, a region I'd never heard mentioned before. The notes scribbled in the margins were cryptic. Circle remains intact. Must not break. Well equals anchor point. Ritual. Blood. Binding. Burial. Burial? I flipped to the back of the journal and found a folded slip of paper tucked between pages. A diagram. Rough lines, circles, a ritual site, marked in red, placed exactly where the cornfield now stood. At the center, the well, I began to suspect my uncle hadn't been just eccentric. He'd been a warden. That night, I heard the whispers again, clearer this time. They came from the walls. Voices too many to count. They didn't speak English. They didn't speak anything I'd ever heard. But I understood them. Bind, bead. The lights flickered. My phone battery, full only minutes ago, dropped to 0. The flashlight died. And then I wasn't alone. I didn't see the thing clearly, not at first. Just movement in the hall, a shape that didn't walk but slithered upright. Its silhouette was wrong, too tall, arms too long, head cocked at an unnatural angle. It didn't step into light, only lingered at the edge of it, waiting. I closed the door. It knocked. 3 slow raps. Not asking, announcing. I lasted until morning. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty again, but something had been left on the floor. A small bundle of cloth tied with black string. Inside I found a jawbone, human, and a note, handwritten with the same red ink from the journal. It took James when he refused the right. You are the last Rourke. Return what was promised, or we will come hollow and hungry. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just being watched. I was being tested. The house hadn't called me here for closure. It called me back to finish what someone else had started. And it wasn't going to let me leave until I did. Later that evening, I made one last call to my mother. I told her everything about the journal, the well, the thing in the hall, the note. She didn't sound surprised. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it, almost relieved. I tried to keep it from you, she said. But the land doesn't forget, it chooses. Chooses what? There was a pause. Then she said only, "You'll understand when it opens the door." I was about to ask what she meant when the line went dead. I looked up. The cellar door was open, and something was coming up the stairs. There's a sound a person makes when they realize they're not alone in a house that should be empty. A breath caught halfway to panic. Too soft to scream, too loud to ignore. That was the sound I made as the cellar door creaked wider. I didn't run. I froze. The flashlight in my hand flickered, its beam catching on the worn steps that descended into black. Something moved at the base of the stairs. A soft, wet shuffling, like bare feet dragging through mud. But when I called out, "Hello?" there was no reply, just silence. Heavy? Watching. I should have turned around, but curiosity is a rot, and I was already infected. I stepped down. Each board groaned under my weight, and the deeper I went, the colder it became. The air turned damp, metallic. It smelt like rusted nails and old teeth. The flashlight buzzed, the beam weakening. That's when I saw the scratches, not just random gouges in the walls. These were deliberate carvings, symbols like the ones near the well. Some were crude spirals, others jagged lines like broken ribs. And one word kept repeating between them, again and again, etched deep enough to splinter the wood. Bind. I reached the bottom. The cellar wasn't large, but it felt endless in the dark. The space hummed faintly, as though the stones themselves remembered sound. I moved the light across the walls, expecting cobwebs, maybe rats. What I found was worse. Bones. Hundreds of them. Stacked in neat rows along the foundation, some yellowed with age, others still pink with sinew. Most were small, too small to be animals. Children. I recoiled, stumbling over something soft. My hand landed on fabric, an old burlap sack, rotting at the edges. I opened it. Inside were dolls, dozens of them, crude, handmade, some stuffed with straw, others with hair, real hair. Every one of their eyes had been burned out. The humming grew louder. I turned, and that's when I saw her. She stood at the far corner of the cellar, still as a statue, half hidden in shadow. Her face was pale, too pale, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. Her eyes were open wide but unseeing. Her lips parted, but no breath came out. A nightgown clung to her frame, yellowed with age and stained at the hem. "James," she whispered, "is that you?" I couldn't move. My voice caught in my throat. She took a step forward. My legs finally obeyed. I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time and slammed the door behind me, bracing it with a chair. My heart pounded so hard I couldn't hear anything else. But even then, I felt her on the other side. Not angry, just waiting. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the fireplace, the journal in my lap, reading through page after page of increasingly desperate entries. Whoever had written it, my uncle, I was now certain, had known exactly what this land held. And he hadn't just lived here. He'd kept something sealed. The rite is weakening. I hear them in the walls. The binding must be renewed. Bloodline thinning. No heirs. The hollow stirs. If you read this, you are the last. Your blood is the final key. I felt sick. My last name wasn't just a name. It was a lock, and I was what fit it. At dawn, I returned to the well, not because I wanted to, because I didn't have a choice. The field was quieter than before. Still, too still. The stalks didn't move in the breeze, though I could feel the wind on my skin. The ring around the well had grown, more stalks, more tightly curled, as if the field itself was trying to protect what lay beneath. I approached the stone rim, this time prepared. I brought a rope and a lantern, old tools from the barn, tied off at a post. I lowered myself in, boots scraping against damp rock, the descent steep and slow. The light barely reached past 10 feet, but as I went lower, the stone changed, became slick, warmer, living. My hand brushed against something, pulsing. I jerked away but lost grip and fell the last few feet, landing hard on wet soil. The lantern rolled. And I saw it. A chamber, vast, hidden beneath the well. Roots hung from the ceiling like black veins. In the center stood a stone altar, ancient and covered in the same symbols from the house. Bones surrounded it, arranged in spirals, some fresh, some long decayed, and carved into the wall above the altar, written in what looked like blood, was a sentence that froze my spine. "We are the Hollow, and the Hollow is hungry." Then I heard the footsteps behind me, bare, deliberate, and a voice, familiar but wrong. "Welcome home, Simon." It was my uncle's voice, but my uncle had been dead for years. I turned slowly. What I saw was not a man. It wore his face, stretched thin and pale, mouth too wide, eyes black as the pit I'd climbed into. Its arms were too long, its fingers ended in cracked claws. It smelled of soil and rot, and when it grinned, the skin at its cheeks cracked. "You've come to feed us," it said. I ran. Up the wall, clawing at stone, fingers bleeding, rope swinging above like salvation. The creature followed, its breath hot on my back, its claws scraping against the tunnel walls. I reached the top and heaved myself out just as it lunged, its arms shooting up from the well like a spear. I kicked the rotting lid shut and threw my weight on it. Silence. Then laughter. Low, gurgling echoing up from the depths. As I backed away, the field shifted. Every stalk of dead corn turned to face me, and the sky dimmed, though it was only noon. That's when I realized the truth. This place wasn't haunted. It was alive, and it had just woken up. By the time I stumbled back to the house, my lungs were on fire and my legs felt like splintered wood. Dirt caked my palms, blood ran from my elbow, and every few seconds I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting that thing to have crawled from the well, dragging the field with it. But nothing followed. Not yet. Inside, I tore open the pantry and emptied out a jug of salt. I didn't even know why. Some half-remembered instinct, some folklore buried from childhood. Circles of salt keep the dead away, don't they? I poured a thick ring around the base of the fireplace, the doorway, the foot of the stairs. Then I collapsed on the floor, the lantern still trembling in my grip. I'd seen its face, and it had smiled at me like it knew me. I thought of the journal again. I'd barely scratched its surface before. Now, I read it like it was scripture, flipping frantically, devouring page after page. The well was not dug. It was revealed. They asked for a body, and I gave them mine, but only part. The rest stayed behind. She walks again. The Hollow uses her voice now. There must be a binding. There must be a sacrifice. The word kept coming back. Binding. I found a newer entry, scratched so hard the pen had nearly torn the paper. Blood is the lock, flesh is the key. I slammed the book shut. It wasn't just some vague horror story. My family had been involved, willingly, repeatedly. And now it was my turn. But I wasn't going to play by their rules. That night, I returned to the barn. There was a shotgun mounted above the workbench. Old, rusted, but maybe functional. I loaded it, checked it, then tucked it beside me as I sat at the window, watching the field. The stalks moved again, not in the wind. They were parting. A path was opening, slow and deliberate, leading from the well to the edge of the porch. I raised the gun and waited, but nothing came. Then the whispering started. It didn't come from outside, it came from the attic. I crept up the stairs, shotgun in hand, careful not to let the boards creak too loud. At the top was a door I hadn't noticed before, choked with dust, its handle rusted. I turned it slowly and pushed. Inside was a single rocking chair and a mirror. The chair rocked gently, as if someone had just stood up. The mirror, though, that was wrong. It reflected the attic, yes, but not as it was. The version in the glass was darker, rotted. Shapes stood at the edges. Tall, thin figures with hollow sockets for eyes and stitched mouths. And in the center stood the woman I'd seen in the cellar. Her reflection stared right at me. And then she smiled. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. I leaned closer, hypnotized. She repeated the motion, slow and deliberate. Lip readers would have caught it instantly. 2 words. He's here. Something slammed the door behind me. I spun and fired. The blast shattered wood, sent echoes ringing through the attic. When the smoke cleared, the doorway was splintered and empty, but the rocking chair was still moving, faster now. I didn't look back at the mirror. Didn't need to. I bolted back downstairs, grabbing only the journal and my flashlight. I needed answers, desperately. If I couldn't find them here, then I'd drive to town, find someone, anyone, who could explain what this was. I barely made it halfway to the truck before I heard the knocking. It wasn't from the house. It was coming from underneath the ground, like fists against a coffin lid. Then came the voices, dozens of them, all whispering in unison, no language I knew, but they were close, too close. The earth beneath my boots began to rise, swell. I jumped back just as the soil ruptured, and something crawled out. It wasn't human, but it used to be. Its skin was sloughed like wet paper, bones visible beneath like twisted rebar. Its head was bent at an angle too sharp to be natural. One of its eyes was still intact. It was blue, like mine. It looked at me. It recognized me. Then it screamed. I ran, through the field, past the shed, toward the back fence where my uncle's old trail led to the woods. Something wet slapped at my heels. More things were rising, limping, dragging themselves through soil, groaning in voices that sounded far too much like people I'd known. A child, a woman, a man with my father's jawline. They were all coming for me, but I had a head start. I cut through the woods, branches ripping at my face, boots pounding soft dirt. I didn't stop until the trees thinned and I saw it. The old church, crumbled, broken, but still standing, and something inside was glowing, blue. I stepped toward it, breath hitching. Behind me, the forest screamed. Ahead, the church doors creaked open on their own. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut. In the center of the church, where the altar once stood, was a pool of black liquid that pulsed like a heartbeat. And above it, suspended in the air by chains made of bone, was a figure wearing my fate. They say churches are safe ground, holy sanctuaries, where evil has no dominion. Whoever said that had clearly never stepped inside this place. The stench hit first. Not rot, not mildew, but something sharper, almost metallic, like old blood clinging to rusted blades. The air hung heavy, not with silence, but with a hush, like the space itself was holding its breath. The figure above the altar swayed slowly, chains creaking in rhythm with some unseen tide. The face, my face, tilted toward me as if sensing my presence. It wasn't just similar, it was exact. Same scar above the brow, same chipped canine tooth, same faint freckles. But its eyes, those were wrong. Black, lidless, and wide, like it hadn't blinked in years. I should have run. Instead, I stepped forward. As I crossed the crumbling aisle, I noticed something moving along the pews. Shadows shifting as though trying to escape the walls. The floor beneath me pulsed like living flesh, and the pool of black ichor at the altar's base rippled in welcome. The chained doppelganger opened its mouth, but it didn't speak. It sang, a low, rattling melody that resonated in the bones more than the ears. Words I didn't understand, but which scraped at the edge of recognition, like lullabies from a childhood I'd forgotten or suppressed. Behind me, the doors of the church sealed shut with a thunderous boom. I turned, and someone was standing at the far wall, a boy, no older than 13, wearing my grandfather's sheriff badge. I recognized the photograph. It had been buried in a drawer in our kitchen. Dale Holloway, age 13, before he vanished into these woods. The first Hollow to go missing. And now here he was, in the flesh, or something close to it. His voice was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here, Noah." I blinked. "You know my name?" He nodded, solemn. "We all do. We were waiting. For what?" "For you." He stepped closer, barefoot, eyes hollowed by years I couldn't fathom. We tried to stop it, each of us. We buried the book. We salted the land. We set fire to the roots. But it's not in the ground, Noah. He pointed at the pool beneath the altar. It's in us. My hands trembled. What is it? What's happening to our family? Dale didn't smile, didn't blink. The right, a bargain, old and cruel. We gave them what they asked for, and in return, they let us live. Who's they? Before he could answer, the pool boiled violently. The black ichor splashed up, and the chained figure dropped from its perch, slamming into the floor on all fours with a sound like splitting meat. It twitched. Then it rose. Its mouth opened unnaturally wide, stretching ear to ear. No tongue, just a pit of writhing black. And it mimicked my voice. Blood is the lock. Flesh is the key. I stumbled back. The shotgun on my shoulder was trembling too hard to aim, but I fired anyway. Once, twice. The blast echoed through the church, shattering stained glass and rattling the rafters. But the thing didn't fall. Instead, it laughed. A perfect imitation of my own laughter, only distorted, off-tempo, like an echo with a limp. Then it pointed a finger at me, and the lights in the church went out. Total darkness swallowed everything. Even the sounds felt distant, like I was underwater. Then, something touched my shoulder and whispered, "Do you remember what you left behind?" I screamed and rolled, striking blindly with the butt of the shotgun. The lights blinked back on. Dale was gone. The mirror altar shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the figure was now standing on the ceiling, upside down, bones cracking in every joint, still smiling. I fled. I didn't care if I had to tear the walls down brick by brick. I wasn't staying. But before I could reach the doors, something yanked me back by the ankle. The ground itself. The church floor had opened like a mouth. Teeth lined with nails, a tongue of rotted wood. It swallowed me whole. I fell for what felt like minutes, crashing through soil, roots, and something that felt like hair. Then silence. I hit something solid. Stone. When I sat up, groaning, I realized I wasn't in the church anymore. I was in a circular chamber, lit by flickering torches stuck in skulls. Symbols lined the walls, symbols I'd seen in the journal. One word repeated over and over, burned into the stone. Ekareth, I whispered it, and the torches flared. The room shifted, not in layout, in time. The stone around me faded, revealing the same chamber, but with people inside, shadows of people, all holloways. Generations of them. They stood in a circle, cloaks dragging, knives drawn, and in the center, bound and gagged, was a screaming woman. I couldn't hear her voice, but I saw her eyes. My mother. They dragged her to the well and pushed her in. The shadows turned as one and looked at me. Time snapped back like a whip. I was alone again, but now I knew. My mother didn't leave. She was offered. And something in the walls of this place remembered her sacrifice, because now it wanted me. The air in the underground chamber was heavier now, humming with something ancient and alive. I stood frozen, breathing hard, every inch of my skin crawling with dread. The visions were gone, but the echoes remained. Screams trapped in stone, memories soaked into the mortar. My mother, her face terrified, betrayed, and silent, was etched into my mind like a curse. The idea that she hadn't abandoned us but had been sacrificed by our own family made me nauseous. Everything I thought I knew about our lineage cracked open like the rotten timbers of the church above. Something shifted behind me, a slow drag, like skin scraping against damp stone. I turned sharply, raising the flashlight I'd managed to salvage. The beam flickered, dying, but just long enough to catch the sight of a hand disappearing around a corner. Pale, human, moving too silently. "Hey!" I shouted, voice raw. "Stop!" I followed without thinking, through the arched doorway deeper into the catacombs. Each tunnel twisted unnaturally, as if the very path changed depending on who walked it. Names were carved into the walls: Noah Holloway, Carla Holloway, Dale Holloway, even my little brother's name, Luke Holloway, though he'd never set foot in this place. Unless he had. I shook the thought. The handprint smeared on the wall ahead was fresh, wet. I ran a finger through it. Blood. I moved cautiously, shotgun raised. The passage opened into another chamber, this one filled with mirrors, shattered, warped, melted at the edges. No two reflections matched. In one, I was a child again, covered in soot and crying. In another, my face was gone, a black void in the shape of a man. Each mirror whispered fragments of voices, my father's, my own, even the thing from the church. I turned away, then froze. A reflection remained, still and whole. Even when I looked away, I stepped toward it. It was my mother, standing tall, alive, wearing the same jacket she vanished in. She looked at me, smiled softly, and whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." I pressed my hand to the mirror and fell through it. No impact, no resistance, just a pulling sensation like being dragged through cold oil. I landed on grass, night sky above. The forest again, but the trees were wrong. Taller, twisted, limbs bent into unnatural shapes. The stars above shifted slowly, almost deliberately, as if watching. A familiar voice came from behind me. "Noah." I spun. There she was, my mother. Real this time. I could hear her breath, see the tears in her eyes. But her body? Something was wrong. Her movements were stilted, marionette-like. "Mom?" My throat tightened. "Is it really you?" She nodded slowly. "It was supposed to end with me." She stepped closer, arms trembling. "But the Holloways, they made a deal, and the debt never dies." I grabbed her shoulders. "Tell me what they did, please." "They opened the veil," she whispered, "and bled into what lies beyond it. We are reflections, Noah. Copies, sometimes broken, sometimes worse." "What does that mean?" She placed a hand on my chest. "You'll find the answer in the well. That's where they hide what they fear." I blinked, and she was gone. Only her coat remained, folded neatly at my feet. Then the forest around me ignited, not with flame, but with light, pale golden, burning upward from the soil itself. Dozens of figures stepped forward from behind trees, silent, faceless, clothed in ash-stained robes. The ashen circle. Each one bore a mirror where their face should be. Each mirror reflected me, a unified whisper. The rite begins anew. Suddenly, I felt my feet leave the ground. The world spun, I was airborne, and when I landed, I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was at the base of a well. Exactly as she said. The stones were slick with blood, the ropes frayed. Symbols etched into the lip of the opening pulsed with a sickly red glow. The same voice from the church, my voice, echoed from the depths below. Flesh remembers, blood obeys, memory burns. Something clawed its way upward, a hand, charred, then a shoulder, then a face. Mine, but twisted, burnt, smiling. It opened its mouth, and instead of words, it screamed. And every mirror in the ashen circle shattered in response. Cliffhanger. The doppelganger lunged from the well, eyes blazing, and as I raised my shotgun, I realized too late, its shadow was behind me. The blast came too soon, the teeth closed in, and then darkness. It was the smell of burning hair that pulled me back to consciousness, a scorched, acrid tang that clung to my throat as I choked awake. My vision swam in reds and yellows, dancing shadows cast by flickering torchlight licking the curved walls around me. Somewhere above, the sound of a heavy metal grate clanged shut, sealing me into whatever hellish pocket of the Holloway estate I'd just been dragged into. I sat up slowly, stone beneath me. Wet, warm, blood. I wiped my hands on my shirt out of instinct, then regretted it instantly. The fabric was already soaked. I didn't know if it was mine. I had no memory of how I got here. The last thing I remembered was The well. The other me. Teeth. Shadows. And then, nothing. But something else remembered. The walls vibrated with murmurs as though the entire structure was alive and whispering. Not in words, but in fragmented dreams. A girl's scream echoing through soil. A blade slicing flesh under ritual chants. The sound of fire consuming air itself. I pushed myself to my feet. The chamber was circular, carved from natural rock, but lined with wood, aged, blackened, and sagging. There were symbols scorched into every beam, familiar ones now, the ashen circle's mark. In the center of the room was a pit, a pyre, and above it, bound and suspended by fraying ropes soaked in waxen blood, was a body. A girl. Alive, her head lolled, blonde hair matted against her cheek. Her arms were bound but not flailing, she wasn't conscious. Marin. I stumbled forward, reaching instinctively, but the heat rising from the pit was suffocating. I had to shield my face just to approach. "Marin?" I called out, my voice cracking from smoke and fear. "Can you hear me?" A faint groan. Then her eyes fluttered open. One swollen, the other streaked with soot. She looked at me and for a second didn't register anything. Then she screamed. Not at the ropes, not at the pain, but at me. "Noah," she sobbed. "It followed you. You brought it." I froze. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes darted over my shoulder. "The thing from the fire, the one with your face." "It's down here." I turned slowly, shotgun raised. But there was nothing, just the winding tunnel I must have been dragged through. Still, her terror wasn't fake. Her whole body trembled with it, and behind her words I heard something deeper. "The fire remembers you." Marin winced, struggling. "They're going to burn me, Noah. They said it's the only way to close the gate, that my blood will seal it." "No one's burning you," I snapped, moving toward the ropes. The floor shifted beneath me, a trap door. Before I could step back, it dropped. I fell hard, tumbling through smoke and ash until I landed in a narrow tunnel lined with teeth. Not bones, teeth. Human. Hundreds of them, mortared into the stone like trophies. A voice spoke behind me, calm, measured, and somehow familial. "You shouldn't interfere." I turned. It was my grandfather. Not as I remembered him in his final years, sunken and sick, but young, strong. Dressed in ceremonial robes blackened with soot. His eyes were glowing coals, and in one hand he held a lantern carved from bone. "I buried you," I said, voice shaking. He smiled. "Then perhaps you should have buried me deeper." He stepped forward, and the light from the lantern spilled down the tunnel like blood. "This place," he gestured to the wall of teeth, "was built to contain what we invited. Each sacrifice buys time. Your mother resisted, and so the fire took her." "She was your daughter," I said, unable to hide my disgust. "She was," he said, "but she forgot her place. You, on the other hand, you remember, don't you?" I tried to back away, but the tunnel behind me was gone. He raised the lantern, and suddenly I was back in the pyre chamber. Only now, Marin was gone. The rope still hung, but beneath them, in the ash pit, something stirred. A new body lay in the coals, twitching. I approached slowly. It rolled over. It was me. Burned. Blackened. Mouth frozen open in a scream. And yet, the eyes were still moving. They looked up at me and spoke with my voice. "She's still alive, but not for long." "Where is she?" I whispered. The burnt mouth widened. "She's gone beneath the pyre, where the oldest ones sleep." My stomach dropped. I didn't want to ask, but I did. "What are the oldest ones?" The thing that looked like me grinned, teeth crumbling like ash. "They're the ones who taught the fire how to eat." Then the ground cracked open and the pit drew breath. Real, wheezing, wet breath. And below me a stairwell spiraled into darkness, lit only by tongues of flame that moved without heat. I should have run, but instead, I descended. The stairs were not stone, they were ribs. Wide, curving bones, slick with a strange mucus sheen. My boots slipped with each step as I descended, hands grazing the damp walls that pulsed like they were breathing. The deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't a passage built by men. It was grown. Torchlight dimmed behind me, swallowed by thick shadows that bled red from some unseen source below. The air grew hotter, thicker. The stench of burning flesh and rotting wood fused into something ancient, like a memory that didn't belong to me. But I kept going. At the bottom of the stairwell, the chamber opened into something massive, too vast to be underground. A cavern. Its ceiling arched high, impossible, dotted with holes that dripped blood like stalactites. Chains hung from above, each ending in a hook or a jawbone. Beneath them lay rows of stone slabs, altars, each one bearing a body in various states of decay. Some looked centuries old, others were still twitching. And at the center, surrounded by runes scorched into the earth in a spiraling pattern, was a throne, made entirely of bones, and Marin was on her knees in front of it. Unbound now, her head hung low, hair matted with soot. She was muttering something under her breath, again and again. A chant? A prayer? I moved toward her, heart hammering. But then I heard it. Footsteps behind me, dozens of them, hollow, synchronized, echoing. I turned slowly and saw them. The Ashen Circle, draped in robes stitched from scorched fabric and skin, their faces hidden behind burned wooden masks. They walked in perfect silence, forming a ring around the room. None of them spoke, but their presence was suffocating. Not just human. Never just human. One figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, masked carved with antlers, face glowing faintly. The Holloway bloodline returns, it said, in a voice that didn't echo, it shook. I raised the shotgun instinctively, but my arms felt heavy. It's like the heat was melting my muscles. My vision blurred and I staggered forward. The tall figure caught me. Its hand was cold, familiar. Grandfather again. "You've seen the threshold," he said. "You've walked its flame." "What is this place?" I gasped. He smiled. "This is the furnace of God." He turned me toward the throne, and the bones on it began to move. They rearranged, shifted, pulled inward, until something began to form. Not a body, not at first, but a mouth, huge, widening, circular. It spoke without moving, a voice that didn't vibrate the air, but the mind. "Feed me." I fell to my knees. Behind me, the circle began to chant, low, rumbling. They knelt in unison. "Feed me." The mouth opened wider. From its darkness, I saw movement, teeth, endless rows, like a shark. And behind them, eyes. So many eyes, blinking, crying. I turned to Marin, reached for her, but she looked at me now, really looked, and I saw that her eyes were black. "Noah," she whispered. "It chose me." I opened the door. She raised her arm and carved a spiral into her palm with a bone shard. Blood dripped onto the floor. The spiral and the ground ignited. The air screamed. "No," I shouted. "This isn't you." But it was. She smiled, a sad, broken smile. I saw the world end in its mouth, and I still said yes. She pressed her bleeding hand to the spiral. The floor cracked. From beneath, a hand emerged. Pale, elongated, fingers tipped with bone. Then another, and another. The floor gave way entirely, splintering outward as something massive pulled itself through the rune gate. It wasn't the mouth anymore, it was the body behind the mouth, a thing that didn't fit in space or time. Limbs bent wrong, faces stitched into its sides, dozens of them, all me. Every version of me that died in this house, every version the fire had claimed. "Noah," Marin whispered. "Run." But I couldn't move. The thing turned its heads, all of them to face me, and in 100 voices, all mine, it said, We are what your family was hiding. Now we are what you must become. Then it surged forward, and the chamber went dark. There are moments when time doesn't pass, it collapses. When I woke, I was somewhere else. Not above, not below, but inside the thing. I couldn't see, not fully, just flashes, like photographs burned into the backs of my eyelids. Images I couldn't unsee, a sky without stars, a tree with bones instead of branches. Marin's face, smiling at me from beneath a river of ash. Then, my own eyes, staring back at me from the wall of something alive. I sat up, gasping, body soaked in sweat. My clothes were still damp, my hands caked in soot and blood. I was back in the house, or at least something that resembled it, the parlor, or a version of it, twisted and flickering, like the film of reality was peeling. The walls pulsed faintly. The fireplace glowed green. Portraits stared down at me, but their faces were wrong, blurred, stretched. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled. Something moved beneath the floorboards, a slithering vibration that tracked my motion like a shadow. "You're not supposed to be here," said a voice behind me. I spun and saw her. Not Marin. Mother. She stood in the hallway, dressed in the nightgown I last saw her in the day she died, charred at the edges, skin pale like wet wax. But her face was intact, gentle, familiar, and completely wrong. "You're not real," I muttered. "No," she said, stepping forward. "But you are." She raised a hand and I felt it, not on my skin, but in my chest, like a rope pulling from inside. "You crossed the gate," she said. "You woke what sleeps beneath the embers." "The thing in the cavern," I said, voice trembling. "The mouth, the eyes." "Names are dangerous," she interrupted. "It had one once, but your grandfather burned it. Thought that would bury it forever." She looked past me, eyes hollowing. "He was wrong." I turned away from her, focused. This wasn't a dream, it was a ritual space. One that mirrored the real world but was entirely shaped by what had been done and what was still owed. I stepped toward the stairs. She blocked me. "If you go back now, it will follow you," she said. "It already marked you." I didn't ask for this. "No," she whispered. "But you came back. That was enough." Her eyes flickered like candle flames. "Do you know what the Holloways were before the church? Before the fire? We didn't bury our dead, we fed them. The oldest of us never left, just sank beneath the ground and watched. And waited." She raised her hand again. This time, I didn't feel fear. I felt cold. Absolute, gnawing emptiness. "Your father ran," she said, "but not far enough. Your sister saw things she wasn't supposed to, and you—" I lunged, grabbed the railing, forced myself past her. Her form shattered into ash. The hallway stretched and groaned like it hated my presence. Every step echoed in reverse, like someone else was walking toward me at the same time. I reached the study. It was whole again, desk, books, candlelight flickering. On the floor, the journal, grandfather's. The last few pages were fresh, unaged, as if written just hours before. I sealed it below in the bone crypt. I carved the spiral, burned the old names, but it never left. It learned to sleep. And in sleep, it dreamed of doors. One day, one of us will open them again. I flipped the next page. There was a drawing of me, standing in the crypt, Marin beside me, the mouth behind us, wide open. I dropped the book, staggered back, my own breath fogged in front of me. "Noah," said a voice behind me. It was Marin. This time, not in chains, not bleeding, just standing. Her eyes clearer. "You made it out," I said. She shook her head. "No, you're still in." She looked around the room, confused. "This place, its memory, burned into the ash. We're just retracing it." I stepped forward. "I don't understand." She touched my arm. "I think we died, Noah. Or maybe just part of us did, but the house kept the pieces. Then she pulled me toward the fireplace. The green flame parted like a curtain, and there, behind the hearth, was a stairway going down again. "I saw them," she said. "Your mother, my brother, even the priest." "Father Benton?" I whispered. She nodded. "They're not gone, just remembered. By the thing beneath. Every death fed it. Every fire was a sacrifice." We stood at the threshold, and I knew this was deeper than before. A second crypt, older, not built by hands but by need, a place no one living had entered in generations. Marin looked at me. "It's waiting for us." I nodded. We stepped through the flame, and everything turned black. The steps spiraled into the dark, not made of stone, but of some strange, fibrous material. Black, soft, almost breathing underfoot. Marin gripped my arm tighter with every step, as if afraid that if she let go, she'd fall not downward, but outward, into something else entirely. There was no light, yet we saw. No torches, no lanterns, just a pulsing glow that came from the walls themselves, like veins under translucent skin. I tried not to think about what it was, tried not to wonder whether this was earth or flesh. "Marin," I whispered, "if we're inside its memory like you said, does that mean it knows we're here?" Her voice came back hollow. "It remembers us, Noah." That's where we reached the bottom, or what we thought was the bottom. A wide circular chamber greeted us, no walls, just a boundary of flame-colored fog. In the center stood a monolith, cracked and covered in the spiral symbol I'd seen in grandfather's journal. Coils, teeth, eyes. The air smelled of ash and old prayers. There were bones everywhere, but not human, not entirely. Long femurs fused with beaks. Rib cages nested with tiny hands. A child's skull with two jaws. Marin bent beside a stone basin, ran her fingers along the rim. This was an altar, before the town, before the church. For what? I asked, though I knew. For feeding, she said, voice cold. From behind us we heard the chain rattle. 1, 2, 3 times. I turned and saw Father Benton, or what was left of him. He wore the remnants of a priest's collar, but his body was half cindered, blackened flesh giving way to pale worms of muscle. His left eye gone entirely, the socket burning with green flame. But he smiled. "Welcome back, children," he said, lips dry. "You've brought it closer to waking." "Why?" Marin demanded. "Why you?" He took a step forward, his gait jerking like a marionette on broken strings. They thought the church could hide it, confine it with symbols and scripture. But it thrived in silence, in repetition. That's why the fire had to happen again. That's why we needed blood again. Marin's breath hitched. "You lit the house!" He didn't deny it. The Holloway fire was the first attempt, but they botched the ritual. Only one heart offered. Yours, Marin, was promised, but you survived. I stepped in front of her. You used her. You used my family. I served, Benton whispered. I obeyed. He raised a hand and the monolith shivered. From within its cracks came a low sound, like breath being drawn from a dead man's throat. The fog parted slightly, revealing not space, not void, but depth. A tunnel spiraling downward in an impossible direction. From it came voices, hundreds, thousands, chanting. Marin screamed. I grabbed her, but something pulled her, not away, down, into the spiral. "Noah!" she cried, slipping from my grasp, her fingers clawing at the soft floor. I dove, caught her hand, held tight. My shoulder wrenched as something yanked back. "Don't let go," she sobbed. "I won't." But the pull was everywhere, from the tunnel, from the fog, from within our own heads. Then, a voice, low, feminine, familiar. "Let her go, Noah." I looked up. My mother stood beside Benton, her body whole again, face peaceful, eyes wrong. "She's not yours to save," she said. "She was meant for this, and so were you." She raised a hand, fingers splayed in the sign of the spiral. The monolith pulsed once, and Marin screamed again, blood trailing from her nose. I made a choice. I let go, but not of her, of everything else. My breath, my fear, my doubt. I leapt with her into the spiral, into the dark. And the moment we crossed the threshold, something snapped. Not a sound, a rule, a truth. The spiral didn't just ascend, it folded, bent around us, warping time and space like we'd entered the goddamn throat of the earth. And suddenly, I saw it. The truth behind the house, behind the fire, behind Marin, behind me, and it whispered my name, not once, but 3 times. Falling didn't feel like falling, it felt like remembering, a terrible, bottomless recollection, as if every cell in my body suddenly knew where we were going and hated me for it. There was no gravity, no ground, just a slow pull inward, not unlike sinking into a dream or drowning in your own lungs. Marin and I didn't scream anymore. We couldn't. The air here wasn't meant for noise, only for knowing. The spiral wasn't a tunnel, it was a spine, and we were sliding down the vertebrae of something so ancient, so vast, it didn't have a name, just hunger. When we landed, we didn't even hear the sound. Our feet simply stopped moving, like the spiral had grown tired of swallowing and decided to hold us still. We stood in a dome. No, a womb. The walls pulsed, soft and translucent. Through them you could see flickers of memories not your own, images bleeding into the tissue like distant thunder. A man walking into fire smiling, a child scratching a spiral into her own chest, a house with a red door opening to a hallway that never ended. Marin clutched my hand tighter than ever. She looked pale, hollowed. "Noah," her voice cracked. "I don't think we're meant to leave." I looked down. The floor was a mirror, and it didn't show us. It showed versions of us. One where Marin's eyes were black voids, and her arms ended in spirals of bone. Another where I was wearing Father Benton's collar, whispering to children in a schoolroom full of smoke. And another still, this one was worse, where we were both kneeling in the church, hands bound, whispering together in a language not ours. I shut my eyes. "I won't be part of this," I muttered. The voice that answered came not from beside me, but from within. "You already are." The room dimmed, and from the far end of the chamber something rose. It was not a creature, not a god, not even a shape. It was pattern, movement, a ripple of rules, like the law of decay, the pull of gravity, the inevitability of forgetting. It shimmered like oil and shadow, and wherever it moved, the flesh of the spiral bent to its will. A mouth opened within it, not to speak, to understand. And in that instant, I felt every thought I'd ever had, every lie I'd told, every secret I'd buried, ripped out of me and laid bare. Marin dropped to her knees, weeping blood. The voice, its voice, spoke, but it didn't use words. It used certainty. You were always going to be here. A scene unfolded before us like theater. The Holloway house burned again, but this time we weren't just watching, we were inside. The fire wasn't flames. It was memory, burning in reverse. I saw my mother again, holding me close, whispering the rhyme that once made no sense. 3 times the spiral must be drawn, 1 for blood and 2 for dawn, the 3rd to choose what can't be gone. And I understood. The ritual was never about summoning anything. It was about opening a door, a womb, a path. Benton had merely misunderstood. The spiral was not a god to serve, it was a law to become. Marin rose slowly beside me. Her skin shimmered faintly. Her eyes no longer held fear, only clarity. "Noah," she said, "it's not trying to take us. It's trying to return us." My hands were trembling. "I don't want to forget who I am," I whispered. She looked at me, eyes soft. Then remember together. From the spiral's core, something shifted. A pulse, a breath, a heartbeat. It began to open like a flower made of teeth. And behind it, just for a moment, we saw something. Not monstrous, not cruel, just waiting. The face of the thing we used to be, and the spiral whispered once more, "Choose." I chose not to speak. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because words didn't matter here, not anymore. The spiral didn't want explanation or confession. It wanted alignment, resonance. Marin stepped forward first. She reached out, not with her hand, but with the space between choices, a slow unfolding of will. Her form shimmered, glitched, and then held. Her skin pulsed with the same rhythm as the chamber. She turned back to me and smiled. "Noah," she said softly, "do you feel it?" I shook my head. I didn't want to feel anything. Not the terror, not the memory, not the pull in my chest that told me this had always been the destination. "You will," she whispered, and then she walked into the spiral. Not metaphorically, literally. Her body phased into the vortex of moving ribs, bones, symbols, and time. The mirror floor rippled. Her reflection fractured into 1,000 lives, each one dying, rebirthing, remembering. A child, a priestess, a hunter, a mother, a voice whispering in someone else's ear across centuries. She became part of it. The spiral pulsed with light. Not white, not gold, something older, a color the human brain forgot how to process. And then she was gone. I stood there alone. My chest hurt. My lungs fought each breath. But I knew that door wasn't meant for everyone. It was meant for one. And the spiral always required a balance. Blood for blood, memory for memory. One stays, one walks. I fell to my knees. "Noah," a voice said behind me. Not Marin. Something smaller, younger. I turned. The girl from the beginning. The one who screamed behind my eyelids when I first entered the Holloway house. The one I saw in dreams. The one who had drawn the spiral over and over in ash and soot. She was here, real, no older than 10. Freckles, dirt-smudged cheeks, eyes full of something far too ancient for her face. "Who are you?" I croaked. She tilted her head. "You knew me once, before the forgetting." And then she stepped closer, pressed a hand to my forehead, and I remembered. I was never just Noah. I had worn that name like a shirt. Beneath it, deeper down, I was the keeper. One of many across centuries, entrusted to ensure the spiral always turned. But I failed. I chose love. Marin. She was never meant to enter the house. But I let her, and now the spiral had reset. I looked at the girl. "What happens next?" She smiled, sad. "Now you return to your post." The chamber around us dissolved. Walls faded into chalk lines. The spiral closed behind Marin like an eyelid, and the house reappeared. The same crumbling stairs, the same burnt wallpaper, but now, silence, complete and total. I was alone, again, but different. I stood up. My body was heavier, older, like I'd aged 50 years in a blink. My hands trembled as I reached for the journal still tucked in my coat pocket. The final page had rewritten itself. The spiral turns, the keeper watches, the next must knock. I closed the book. Upstairs, I heard footsteps. The front door creaked open. A voice echoed. "Hello? Is someone here? We're doing a local documentary on haunted places. This is Holloway, right?" I walked slowly to the staircase, peering down. A group of 3 stood in the threshold, camera lights, boom mic, fresh energy. They were smiling, unknowing. I sighed, and I smiled too, because the spiral never ends. It only waits. And it had begun to turn again. "Thank you for walking this dark path with me. If you've made it this far, you've just survived the spiral, and maybe, in some way, it's survived you too. This story was never meant to provide comfort. It was meant to whisper in the back of your mind when the room goes silent, to make you hesitate before entering an empty house, to make you wonder, just for a moment, if the floorboards beneath your feet remember you. To those who listened, imagined, and let themselves be pulled into the spiral, thank you. And to those who are still feeling its echo after the final word, you're exactly who the spiral was waiting for. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this story if it haunted you in the best way. And if you ever find yourself on the front steps of a house no one seems to remember, don't knock. You never know who or what might answer. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never trust the silence.